Hello and welcome once again to Beyond the Physical Summit with me, your host Sitara. I am here with a dear friend of mine, Miss Izzy Ivy. We became friends on Bali during what I lovingly like to call the panini. We'll get into that a little bit more as we go through this conversation, but it is my absolute honor to introduce her today. She is a visionary artist, a multidimensional visionary artist whose work really transports us into another field of remembrance and another field of awareness of where our soul has been. Her first deck was, or she paints oracle decks. Let me clarify that real quick. Her first deck was the Beyond Lumeria deck. Absolutely stunning, if I do say so myself. In July, a second deck that is going to be coming through is Unveiling the Golden Age. And then we have the Light Code Apothecary coming in next year. So I'm excited to ask you about all of these. And she also teaches people how to do this. So she teaches people how to channel their own visions, as well as how to paint illuminated visions with, I'm sure, some strategy and some pointers involved to up level the skill set. But ultimately, it's really about bringing that vision from the heart onto the canvas. So, Izzy, it is just my joy and honor to have you here. Thank you so much for jumping in with us.
Such a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I'm really excited for what you're bringing through, Sitara.
Oh, thank you. And likewise. So, the first thing that I think I'd love to ask you is just, can you walk us through the process of the inspiration on how you got started painting oracle decks? I know that's a
Mm.
big question.
Well, I think if I had known that I was going to paint an oracle deck at the beginning, I might have been too overwhelmed to actually start it. So the universe gave it to me in pieces, which were more kind of fathomable. um, yeah, I was actually not even going to be writing the Beyond the Myria originally. I was supposed to have somebody else write it, and I was going to be doing the paintings. And yeah, suddenly I had, I don't know, several people just intuitively tell me, you're going to write the deck. And then the person that was originally going to be writing it said that she had a dream and that I would write the deck. And sure enough, the publishers were like, it's almost, but it's not quite. So there was some aspects there. And then as soon as I kind of allowed myself to just kind of receive the fact that maybe that was a reality, and I did have some like resistance because I'm dyslexic and I really didn't feel like I was maybe capable of doing it. But as soon as I kind of softened into that, the downloads came through. I got messages to go to Mount Shasta. I got all these like things that some pointers, and I was like, wow, I've never even been to America. Like, what how? But and so started the journey of following the whispers. But yeah, I wasn't a painter for my whole life either. That only happened, I mean, I've been painting for 10 years now, which feels like a while, but that also was its own like unfurling, and just my soul really felt like I was supposed to be doing this, but I wasn't entirely sure what that looked like. So again, it's this whole piece aspect of like following the whispers step by step. The universe would sort of unveil it to me, and I couldn't not do it. So I've really just devoted myself, and the more I devote myself, the more the universe seems to give me assignments. So that's kind of how it's been.
Like, I get that. I get it
Right?
completely. Yes, it's like that inner turning inside of your soul that's like, what else would you be doing? What else would
Right?
you be spending your time in this world doing other than that thing? And it's so funny actually to hear or learn that you're dyslexic, because we actually had my book coach, who we call the book doula. um, we had him on here and he also said that he was dyslexic growing up. And so something he never thought that he would do was to be a writer. And I similarly, I English and literature was my worst subject. I'm a math and like geometry gal. like through and
Mm,
through. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I've also written. It's like when allowing that piece of just whatever it is that wants to come through, and
mm,
whatever that voice is that's saying like don't do it, or you're not good enough, or it's there's something so magical that happens when we just simply allow that urge to move through us in the way that
mm,
it needs to come through. So I have had just an absolutely blessed honor to spend personal time with you as you are painting, and have been so amazed. One, I mean, at seeing you painting and channeling, especially in social events, because I I'm aware at how sensitive that opening can be, how sensitive that channel opening can be. And so, can you speak to what it's like to be live painting in social settings when you have those experiences and channels and downloads coming through?
That's a really good question because I am very sensitive. And when I have, a big painting session in my studio, even just leaving the house can be overwhelming. So the idea that I'm in a social setting with all of this stuff going on, I could see that there would be like, well, how really? But
Mhm.
it's so curious because it's almost like I'm in this bubble, but it's not like I'm disconnected from the people there. Not at all. If anything, the energy of all of those souls is really fueling what I'm creating. There
Mhm.
was a period of time, especially when I first started painting, where I really would love being on stage. Somehow things just aligned that way, and there would be events where I would be painting alongside whoever's DJing or making music, and just the incredible like force of all of that energy on stage made me paint so fast. And like I would paint a whole painting from start to finish in like 5 or 6 hours without even moving. And it was, yeah, it was like surfing this wave. It's
Mhm.
true, I did get quite energetically obliterated at the, when I got off stage. So that's why I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But when I'm in like high vibing events, even ceremonies are actually one of my favorite places to live paint now. But yeah, I'm not sure how familiar people are with the human design system, but I'm a reflector, so I'm really kind of just like sampling all of that energy, and it really kind of gives me that extra like oomph to create. But there feels like this sort of protective bubble around me too, because I know when I've painted with other live painters, they it seems like they're I find that I really do. I feel like I can kind of just stay in this space where I'm not really distracted. So I'm not
Yeah.
really sure what's going on there. There's like this paradox that happens where I'm simultaneously feeling everyone and also in this kind of bubble where I can just 100% focus all my energy. So it's
Mhm.
quite a phenomena, I suppose.
Yeah,
But yes,
I'm
clearing is very important. Doing clearing work afterwards, especially, in that space when you're really open. Like I have to do that generally a lot in my life, because of
yes.
how sensitive I am, but especially after those circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah, I can visualize what it is that you're saying. It's like being in the bubble and feeling and being aware. It's almost like having hyper awareness of like 360-degree view of what's going on and who's there, but also
Mm,
not absorbing. But then simultaneously, because I have had experiences in that way where I've done readings or I've done healings at music festivals. And one specific, I mean, that energetic obliteration afterwards, especially being in a field where psychedelics are being used and people are drinking. The
mm,
psychedelics I can kind of handle a little bit more, but the drinking is like where things get really wonky, and then you have the entity thing, and then you're like, ah, and
exactly.
it gets chaotic.
Yeah.
And similarly, I think I did like 3 or 4 festivals in my early years of being a baby psychic, and
Mm,
I was like, there's no way. I was at
yeah.
Lightning in a Bottle one time, and I think I slept for 14 hours straight after doing healings in the healing center because of having to create the bubble, and creating that bubble that we're safe in to do the healing work. It took
Mhm.
just as much energy as even doing the healing, if not more, to create that safe and sacred space with so much. stuff going on.
Yeah.
So, and simultaneously, what I'll say to that, and maybe this is true for you, I did find that it made me stronger in my abilities. It made me stronger in my capabilities of being able to withstand more energy and knowing that like there's a resilience there. It doesn't have to be like, "Ooh, I can't go there." Like, it's no, I know, I
Mm,
just know what I need to do afterwards sort of thing.
totally. That makes sense. I almost feel like there's like a transmutation that happens sometimes too, because I actually just recall that I was just recently at a festival where I was painting, which I wouldn't, maybe put myself in those circumstances so much these days, but it felt like I just needed to be there and do and paint this kind of paradise-like landscape. And I don't know, I just trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that for sure. If you when you feel the call, you know that the call is there for
Mm,
sure. And there's usually a reason or a person or people or conversations or something, it's that divine right order sort of thing.
mhm,
So I have a memory of, I think it was the first time that you and I really dropped in, and it was at a good friend's, I think it was a birthday party, and we were sitting out in the grass. But as we were talking about it, I had a different kind of perspective of a vision that I want to voice and share a little bit. Um, because you paint these beautiful sceneries and some of very ornate temples. And I know that
mm,
you and I have talked about our memories in Lemuria or our memories and connections to Atlantis, and not only knowing that one, those experiences were very much real, but also that those parallel realities are existing simultaneously. And so
mhm,
I had this just vision, this insight of you painting and also being aware that there are people, or that there are people who are here in your life now, or friends that have also been in those other lifetimes. So,
mhm.
do you feel that there's a resonance, or that something that opens up, like you're saying, by the people that are in the room and their own soul encoding and what they're bringing to you, especially as a reflector, to be able to pick up on that and then translate it into your art?
Right. So they're almost the presence of some of these beings in the space are almost like opening portals for more information. Is that kind of what you're saying? Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I definitely do find that. I did go through a stage of painting spirit paintings for people, and that was so fascinating and extraordinary because I got to tune into people's like soul frequencies, and the things I would paint were, I mean, obviously it's my style, but they were really unique to their
Mhm.
energy. And yeah, it's kind of an honor in that way to be able to tune into these portals that I didn't normally actually have access to,
Mhm.
perhaps, or at least it was like there was a remembering that they were like jogging for me. Um, yeah, yeah, I definitely would say that. I mean, because I do still do quite a bit of live painting, and usually it is in a way where sometimes I can have interactions with people, which I love.
Mhm.
But because what I'm painting or whatever opens up questions for people, and it's just a really interesting like two-way feedback loop. But I do find like sometimes someone will pass through, my reality, and I suddenly feel inspired to paint something that I wasn't going to paint before, or it was just like this little energy signature that they just like kind of dropped in there. So yeah, I think it's a co-creation for sure,
Mhm.
when I'm in those places painting. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I can definitely say that in my journeys of doing readings and connecting with people in that way, that there are certain people that I have met, and you are absolutely one of them, that has, it's almost like I'll have a conversation, but then over the next couple days, it's like I'm seeing visions, or I'm having memories, or certain things come up that I know are part of, and it's almost like, how different people bring out different things in us. Well, if there's
Mm,
certain people that have embodied certain codes genetically and also through their soul lineage, it's almost like the high five is the transference of energy that then awakens that inside of us. And
mm,
that's a lot of also what I've learned with the light codes. I sometimes explain them as like when you go and you've gotten too drunk and you've like completely forgotten what you've done, and then your friend will be like, well, do you remember when you did this, and you remember when you did that, and it's like the memory like starts to come back, and you're maybe a little bit embarrassed, but like all that aside, that's similar to what I and how I explain light codes to people, is that the light codes themselves are accessing and they're activating those very, very deep soul memories that help you to remember where your soul has been before this personality, before this avatar, before this incarnation.
Mhm.
So I think that's a beautiful bridge into the light code apothecary, because I know that that was a whole experience for you to birth out into the world. So can you share a little bit about that and how that manifested and channeled through you and what it's designed to do for people?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's an interesting one because this whole light code reality is just, I'm just hearing it everywhere. Everyone is tuning into it. It's so incredible that whether it's through hand gestures or spoken or singing or written or painted, like it's coming through, and it's really amazing because um, I think, well, there's firstly just a lot of information that's just ready to come through, and I think what's potent about it is that it speaks to the heart rather than the mind. So this is where this like remembering is coming in. You know, it's like doesn't really make sense to our logical mind. It might even seem kind of weird, but there's this like, whoa, what is that feeling inside of me? Yeah, I guess I've been working with light language for maybe about 7 years now, and there's been different like there's about 5 or 6 different glyphs that are quite distinctly recognizable, and each time I've sort of received a new one, there's been different meeting points and downloads and specific journeys or beings that I've met along the way. um, but yeah, the light code apothecary is almost actually so that the deck that I was working on last year, um, it's um, it's actually kind of coming from a place for star seeds to find their human, because there's a lot of like information about how we can get out there, but so many of us are now waking up so so quickly, and it can be a little bit like a kid in a sweet shop astrally. And so this is actually, it's actually a very grounded or very like anchored project.
Mhm.
Funnily enough, quite a bit of it, well, one of the key themes I actually got when I was at Shasta, and I sort of tuned in up at Heart Lake, and I was like, okay, guys, what is it that you want humanity to know? And they gave me some information that I was quite intrigued by. And actually, now in hindsight, it's really making a lot more sense. And because there's such a big time lag between creating an Oracle deck and then the actual time that it's published, like I created the Unveiling the Golden Age 2.5 years ago, and it's going to be released just next month. I think the gap is going to be a bit smaller for the next one. But sometimes the information comes through in advance that I don't necessarily know why. Well, let's just put it this way: everything just happens in perfect timing.
To
And so I'm
simplify.
slightly sidetracking there, but yeah. So the codes for that project, yeah, it's a whole thing. I don't want to like spend too much time talking about it, but I can.
I
It,
I I like you're saying, I think light codes and light language is like a hot topic, and it's something that is confusing. And let's also say that it's a hot topic for people that are ready to have that conversation. Because the
mm,
majority of the population really isn't. You're surrounded
mhm,
by them because you're a light being, and magical people attract magical people. And so, like, being in that field, I think it's a little bit easier. But, like, I go to Dubai and I'm the only one that I know that's channeling light language. And
mm,
so, there is a bit of education that I do think is important. And especially, just especially now, because it's misunderstood and it's kind of weird. Like it's weird when you watch or you see somebody speaking it. I had
mhm,
my socks absolutely blasted off, not knowing what was going on when I started channeling it. So I had to like
mm,
figure out what it was and how I associated with with it. And actually, the day that I started channeling, or I think it was the next morning, I scribed and scribed and scribed and scribed and scribed for probably like 6 pages. I didn't even know what I was writing. It looked like light codes in cursive. It just looked like a bunch of symbols. But the thing
Mhm.
is when you look at it, it does look like a lot of scribbles, but it's the feeling. You
Mm.
look at it and you receive the feeling of what it is that you're looking at. And so that's one of the things that I think is so important to speak to, and not just I might take us here into a little bit of an uncomfortable zone, but not just with light codes, that there are seeded symbols and sigils that can be implanted into our subconscious that have an influence on us. And so as we get into light codes and know about light codes, and I use it for my logo, like I
Mm.
see this symbol with prayers, and I mean they're ancient symbols anyway, so there's a lot of consciousness that's already connected to it. But
Mhm.
when we're looking at these codes, and you mentioned it with your tapestries as well, that there's an activation that happens in your home. So from your perspective, can you speak to how that technology actually works?
Yeah, no, this is really awesome question. Um, yeah, because it's interesting with the Beyond Lemuria Oracle deck, because people were like, so who are these beings? Like, are they Lemurians? Are they like who are these beings? And
Mhm.
I mean, yes, some of them are, but most of them are actually personified light codes. So
Right.
I know that the way that humans like to interact with things is through a personified um way of having them
Yeah.
manifest, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So yeah, it's obviously there's, I mean, the light codes that we're maybe more familiar with are more like the sigil symbol type, but I do think that like a whole image is a container for an array of different information. And the reason why I feel this, like I guess like I'm saying this is because there was a period of time for several years where I was getting a lot of downloads. So it's just these big washes of really beautiful, blissful energy moving through my body, and I'd just be like, okay, I just have to like lie down because I'm just not going to be able to move in a minute. Like I know you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there would be these downloads. And what I was told is that this information stayed in my energy field until I went to the canvas. And that's when they would sort of be then downloaded into the canvas and whatever it was that I was creating. And I mean, some people ask me, oh, where do you get your ideas for your paintings? And it's like, sometimes I'll be meditating or dancing. I love ecstatic dance, or just walking down the street or in nature or whatever. And I will get like half the information, like the concept. But then going into that like deep state when I'm actually in the flow state, the theta state, whatever you want to say, while I'm actually painting, is when the rest of the information comes through. And that's where I feel like the codes, whatever's in my field, will then kind of continue to come out.
Right.
And this probably sounds like a pretty far, like, how can I say that this is happening kind of thing. But the thing that just blows me away consistently is the way that people interact with, I guess, my work. And is why I continue to do it, because it does seem to speak to people, and people do seem to have the experiences of the very thing that the intention or the flavor of that energy was. And it seems to be quite universal. So I think that's another reason why, the light language in whatever form or codes, or essentially what we're doing is speaking beyond the mind. And because like, how can we speak in actual linear way when we're trying to remind of someone of this energy? And like, it's never going to happen mentally, because we're constantly going to be judging like, that doesn't make sense, or I haven't had that experience, or I don't know what our minds want to say. But when we really allow it to speak to that visual part of ourselves, or a more like metaphorical part, I feel like we have a much, well, I think the thing is that regular language is linear, and like code language is multidimensional. So and that really just allows for that, without it being like condensed into this like one like line of information where it could really be misunderstood, or not
Mhm.
even like, you know, just missing like 95% of the rest of the information. So yeah, I think that whole non-linear multidimensional aspect is what we're kind of tuning into there. I'm not sure if I completely answered your question. Feel free to like guide me back in if
Well,
if there were some other aspects.
I love this because I mean, I have my own relationship with light language and light
Mhm.
codes, and I love to paint, but my gift isn't necessarily painting. I want to do a little show and tell moment. I haven't done this
Yay.
here, but
Yay.
like my codes come in a little bit differently, and like I said, they're more like scribbles. This is one of my favorite pieces, but they're like
Beautiful.
more like scribbles, but still similarly, there's an encoding that comes through like when I'm channeling them that one, it's like my hand just can't move fast enough to get it out. You know, there's like nothing going on in my mind that's this is how this needs to look or this is how this needs to be. And similarly to what you are saying, it's that there's a receptivity of the person that is looking at it because you're
Mm,
not reading it, you don't have any association with it, your egoic consciousness basically allows it to come in or not. And I see light language as like a sound healing. So to use the word technology with it can kind of be like a weighted word, but
mm,
the idea that when you hear certain syllables, remind your soul of participating in ancient civilizations before the recording of written language.
mhm,
I mean, that in and of itself is something that is absolutely mind blowing, but you've clearly seen it work with people. In my
mhm,
work, I've had, I think in the first 3 months that I started channeling light language, we had like 10 to 15 people in my own inner circle that started channeling light language as well. And so there's the activator part of it that
mhm,
it isn't just the piece of remembering, like you're saying, like how do you like wake somebody up? Like
mhm.
remember the truth, remember without being like a crazy person.
Yeah.
Um, even though we are, whatever, it's okay. The ones outside the lines I find are a little bit more exciting and entertaining anyway. Um, but like the truth of the matter is that these are ancient languages. I believe that we all have the capabilities to speak them. We all have the capabilities to write them. It all exists in us already. It's not a
Totally.
language that you learn. It's not something that somebody teaches you. It literally comes from within the heart, and there's nothing to study. It simply comes from such a clear and profound knowing. And
Mm,
so I love, 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 love one that you're following the call, you're hearing
mm,
it, you're taking action and bringing these things out into the world because it's just obvious that our planet is in a state of chaos. I
mhm,
mean, we have the end time predictions happening left, right, and center. It's undeniable that we're in a time of prophecy. It's
mm,
wildly exciting to be alive. We have a digital revolution going on that's exciting people and terrifying people at the same time. And it's really like, you know, what do we do? World powers are going to be shifting. Who knows what's going to happen with the like blah, blah, blah. We don't even have to go into that. But I really also believe that that's why light is coming in so strong right now. And that, you know, it came through for me in March of 2020, that it's coming even stronger for you. I remember you talking about doing the light code apothecary, and you're like, I can't stop painting. I can't get away from this. I have to do it. I have to finish it. I remember
mhm,
it like consuming so much of, you know, your time and energy and that sort of thing. And at the same time, it was like, I get it. I get it, because once that urge comes through, you can't not. And it
mhm,
becomes almost like an obsession until you birth it into form in a really healthy way. Because I mean, it's just so clear that this is the gift that you're bringing to humanity, and it's
mhm,
such a sacred and such a beautiful gift. And to have the courage, because it does take some courage to be out in the world speaking about these things and putting it on display, and simultaneously we have to know that we're safe. And how do we know that we're safe? we connect with the guardians, we connect with the guides. We know I've never felt more etherically guided and protected in my life than I do now, knowing that every single step of the way that unfolding is happening. And those with eyes to see and ears to hear will hear these messages, and those that do not yet will just simply take a little bit longer.
Mhm.
Yes. So I would love to hear a little bit more. You mentioned that the tapestries that you have, a beautiful one that I see right there behind you, had them all over the friend's house in Bali. Absolutely stunning. So can you talk about how they activate the space? Like we just talked about how they activate us internally, but how do they activate the space?
Well, I think the thing that I like about the tapestries is just that they are large in scale.
Yeah.
I mean, I love so much how the art is on the oracle decks, and the way that they can be used in that way. But they're, like they're small. But when you
Hmm.
have like a really big piece in your home, yeah, there is something that happens. I mean, people have like in some of my paintings too. I don't know, like different kind of like portals in some way, or like activators. I mean, the space that I was in when I was kind of creating them, there was, there was energy that is definitely kind of going into them during that creation process. And so like, of course it can be nice to have like a large original painting, but that's not necessarily always accessible for everyone. And even with the printing, it's great to have like a big, like a large canvas print. But I think something that's nice about the tapestries is that they are, they're easy to travel with because they just, pack down. They're made of fabric. They are, and that's actually great when you're, like if you're traveling and you're just like, I want a little bit of home in my reality, and just put up easily, a tapestry, then it's like, boom, there you go.
Hmm.
So yeah, then they're quite affordable, and they're, easy to look after. So it's just a very accessible way of having a large piece of art in your home, I guess. Yeah.
Hmm. So I'm wondering if this is kind of this is just out of sheer curiosity, wanting to hear
Yeah.
how you feel or what you think about this. Um, do you think that those tapestries almost work, like let's say medicinally, also kind of a funny word, but that they work medicinally, and that a person can spend enough time around them until they basically receive the full dose of what is being offered, and then it's like they're ready for another one or another download or encoding?
That's a really good question. I mean, I guess when we're talking tapestries, I guess just my art in general,
Hmm.
does feel like, yeah, it's funny to say it, but I guess this is why the deck, the light code apothecary, that's why I use the name apothecary.
Yeah.
It's when the name came to me, I'm like, wow, okay, and like those cards specifically, like there's an aspect that there's a type of like coding that works energetically with your field. Then there's an actual light code specific to the information that's being shared. And then there's like a little visual representation that your mind can get your head around. So that's like how
Hmm.
each one of those cards works. So there's like different ways of receiving that energy or information in a kind of simplified way. But I guess for actual just general paintings that have been turned into tapestries, like, yeah, I could totally imagine that could be the case. I know just from doing exhibitions that sometimes people are just really, really drawn to a particular painting, and it's got so many codes for them, that are really specific to where they are in their life. And this thing means that, and that thing means that, and all the different things, they have a lot of meaning for them, which is why I generally don't always like to be like, oh yes, this is the cut and dry meaning of this painting. It's like it speaks to you how it's meant to speak to you. It's like your own unique, you receive whatever you need from it. What's it, an adaptogen or something?
I
um,
I think adaptogen is the perfect word. I think I would use that one as well.
Yeah. So, in some ways it feels like a bit of a big thing to say, oh yeah, my painting is gonna heal you, whatever, in that way. But
Mhm.
I think it's just again that reminder of how things have been in, Lemurian and Atlantean times, or in times when we were in other prior golden ages, that we think of technology and healing in particular ways from referencing our current time. But I'm aware that there was a lot more prevalence in the arts and the visual, and there were other methods of receiving healing that we may be like overlooking in this current day and age. So I would say yes in regards to your question. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was very curious to notice, right? Because I use the codes to create the meditations, and I would see um it was like the person's consciousness would only receive, like you're saying, the adaptogenic, the person's consciousness would only receive to the extent that that person could receive without like blowing out their system or fritzing out their egoic consciousness, almost like a time release kind of healing. And then what I would notice, and as I say at the end of a lot of the meditations, is check in with your intuition and ask your intuition how many times it's important for you to listen to the same recording to receive the full dose. And even when I was channeling it, the program, I had one that was like 23, and I was like, 20, I'm like, it's coming through me. I had to listen to it 23 times, my ego monkey mind sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's what I noticed is like, it's like it will peel away a layer and it will peel away a layer. And so I could imagine that with the light code apothecary, and I would say any of the cards. I know we're talking about the light code apothecary, but we also have Unveiling the Golden Age coming out in June. So I want to give that one a little bit of attention here too, is that I'm sure those, it's like the codes, like you're saying, if in Beyond Lumeria there's a personification of the code, then spending time with that code is going to help embed that frequency into the consciousness of who's viewing it and who's feeling called to it. You don't necessarily need to know why you're feeling called to the image or why you're feeling called to the tapestry or whatever that is, but that receiving and the viewing and having it in your space and having because the codes have frequency. And so if you have, like you're saying, a big one on the wall, it's going to shift the frequency and the consciousness of the space that you're in a way that up levels everybody that's in there or protects the space, becomes a guardianship sort of thing. Also, probably a magnet for like-hearted beings, which is also always a beautiful thing when that happens. But I love sharing about like the technology of the codes, because I think that's really where the mystery comes in for a lot of people, and where they either want to accept it or dismiss it. And that acceptance of understanding how they work, I found, has also helped to like lower the guard a little bit and not just kind of dismiss it as like, oh, it's a symbol on a painting. Well, if it's evoking a strong feeling and a strong sensation inside, then it is important to lean into that and acknowledge that there's a shift that's happening from the wisdom that's been channeled through.
Yeah. Yeah, and in light of what you shared as well, I just feel to add that with the first Oracle deck that was released a few years ago, Beyond Lemuria, I worked with it all the time, every day. It was my go-to. And as soon as it went out into the world, like as soon as it was published, it was like my baby grew up, and I was like, I never used it again. So it's
Amazing.
interesting. And then then the other decks come in and I'll become familiar with them. So there is something that you've touched on that's quite fascinating there as well, is that we receive this information, but there's also a kind of like bumbling human that also needs that information. And we'll and so, like you say, it could take 23 times to actually, for it to really like merge with the 3D versions of ourselves and what we're like here to be learning and growing through as well. So yeah, very
I mean, a
fascinating.
lot of us had 13 years of hardwired, systemic programming and viral belief systems just stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked on top of us. So viewing one code one time, they are extremely powerful. They can cut through that viral programming like a warm knife through butter. Like, absolutely, I've seen it happen. And simultaneously, some of those hardwired belief systems that we've been indoctrinated with, as well as the ancestral healing that we're doing, And not only that, the doubt and the fear that what we're seeing in these visions is actually real and true. It
Mhm.
wasn't really until I started having these visions with other people that it helped me to move through my doubt. And that's why I think like psychic development, and I'm sure that you do sharing with your classes,
Mhm.
it's hearing from other people's experiences that validates that what you're seeing is real and what you're seeing is valid. And like that whole bit of self-doubt and I mean, just the amount of layers of the belief that these systems are crazy or that they're wackadoo or that they're woo. I myself had to move through so much of it, and I was born a medium. I was born
Mhm.
seeing spirits, but I didn't know how to comprehend it. And still, at the beginning of my journey, I had so much doubt to move through and so much resistance and so much of just not believing in even myself or the visions. And once I started to really recognize that what I see with my eyes closed is oftentimes more accurate and more precise than this hard material world that we live in, it was like
Mhm.
that's when the script just flipped completely for how do you embody your own divine creatorship. And I
Mhm.
would say that you have, blasted through so many of those gates to really embody your soul purpose and what you've chosen to come in here and chosen as a very poignant term, even as a soul coming in your super cute avatar to come and hang out at ecstatic dance and paint these really cute and blessed beings and just illuminate the world. Like what a beautiful choice that your soul has made to come and share all of this with us. So in case nobody said that, thank you.
Mhm. Couldn't do it any other way.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, I am just noticing we absolutely time warped here. I that happened fast. So I would love to give you an opportunity also to share. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything that you would like to share with the listeners? Anything that's at the top of your heart?
Mm. Well, just one little message is just, like some of those little quirks that we have that we sometimes like doubt about ourselves and we're like, why do I do that thing? Or why do I experience reality in this way or whatever? They might just be keys to, your jigsaw puzzle piece in the whole scheme of things. They might just be, well, there's a lot of people that often are like, well, what's my life purpose? And it's probably the thing that, firstly, the thing that you probably are putting off until tomorrow. But it's the thing that you absolutely love to do. And secondly, some of those little traits that are quite unique to you might be little key unlocking aspects to the bigger picture perspective of that. Um, for me, I'm synesthetic and dyslexic and just get a lot of information, colors and shapes to the point of it being like overwhelming. And it wasn't until I started doing the energy work where I started to realize that this was an amazing way to journey with people when I was working one-on-one.
Mhm.
And then of course when I discovered painting, that gave me a whole wide array of well, it just really just made sense, and was what I guess helps me to be able to share information in a way that is, yes, speaking between the lines, I guess. So yeah, I guess that would be something that I feel inspired to share.
Love
But
that.
yeah, in
I'm
terms of
feeling it.
yay.
Yes. It's like that deepest secret desire that we're focused on, like what is the day commanding of us rather than focusing on that. And yeah, thank you for the permission and encouragement to pay more attention and to encourage that part to come out because that is it's so important. So thank you for that gem. I obviously 10 out of 10 recommend that you guys stay connected to Izzy. I'm sure we'll put her Instagram in the description below. She's also generously sharing a 15% off for her tapestries. So you can find them at izzyivart.com and we'll put all the details in the description here. So, Izzy, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so glad we were able to coordinate and put this together. I know that since we time warped, so much more information came through than what was spoken. So,
I
thank
love
you
it.
for your presence and your wisdom. It is an honor and a joy to know you and journey in this life with you. So, I just have nothing but wonderful things to share and say. I'm absolutely honored that you're here today.
Thank you so much, Sitara. And yeah, so grateful to be a part of this magic that you're weaving and this coalescence of information that you're sharing. So yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
for
We'll
showing
see
up.
how it shapes up. Has me shaking in my boots every now and then.
Keeps it exciting, right?
Yes. All right. And for those listening, I will look forward to seeing you again on the next interview. Mwah! Ciao, ciao.